Welcome to the Block Time Podcast, produced by Riot Platforms, where we take a deep dive into topics relating to Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining, and electricity and energy. Today, we've got a really special guest, Nick Kyle, one of our electricians in Rockdale. Welcome, Nick, to the show.
Thanks, Beard. Great to be here.
Yeah, when I think about Bitcoin mining, and I think when a lot of people think about Bitcoin mining, they think about the energy intensity. So
Right.
It very much is aligned with kind of the electrical system. And in my mind, it is one of several services that we have to provide to the mining rig for it to be happy and hashing,
Right.
in addition to cooling and that environmental consideration. But the electricity side is absolutely fascinating because I came into this industry with basically zero background in electricity, and learning from you and your team has just been a tremendous experience. So I wanted to have you on the show, kind of share some of the things you've learned, and also kind of get some human background of who is Nick, and kind of your history and how you ended up at Riot. So let's start with kind of your education. How did you learn to become an electrician?
So actually, funny enough, before I came to Riot, all I had done was more of framing and house construction. I never really got to dabble into electricity. Wasn't very fond of it, actually. But coming to Riot, I had no expectations of, what I would be doing. I just wanted to be in this industry. And I was literally digging a ditch one day to run some wires. And I was working for data center because I started on data center. And Cameron needed help building these PDUs for our immersion building F. And he sent somebody to come get me. And since that day, I have been working in the electrical department.
Fantastic. All right. So framing is quite a difficult role.
It very is.
I had my house built, I think like 4 years ago. And I remember they were like, okay, the framers are going to move fastest. They're going to get the whole thing up. I think it was in a matter of weeks, even though building the house took, a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that must have been pretty demanding. Why is it that you didn't like electricity at the time?
Well, so in the framing world, there's a very controversial relationship between framers, electricians, plumbers, and it was really more of the culture of we all hated each other.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I had always just wanted to do framing. I never really wanted to dabble into electricity because it just seemed scary at the time,
Yeah.
I didn't want to get electrocuted, didn't want to get blown up in case I had messed up. Because if you mess up a stud in a wall, you just take it out and put it back. No harm, no foul.
Right.
But in electrical, if you mess up, you're potentially hurting you or somebody else, or quite possibly burning a house down.
Right.
So, that kind of deterred me away from it until I got to Riot and realized, oh my gosh, I'm literally missing out on so many good opportunities that I could have grasped upon prior to this if I had only known.
Yeah, I think that one of the mysteries of electricity is that it's kind of hidden. Like you can't just like look at it and be like, oh, that's a live wire.
Right.
But whereas with plumbing, it's like, well, is water coming out of it, right?
Yep.
It's a lot
Yep.
more tangible.
On the way up here, me and Nick were talking. We got to ride together from the Rockdale site, and we were talking like I can get myself around some garage type stuff. I can do a brake job, I can do a coolant flush, an oil change. But when it comes to wiring and electricity, it's silent. You don't hear it, you don't smell it, like you can't see it. So that to me is one of those things that I probably haven't dove into very much either.
And then you have the in the movie where they're trying to defuse the bomb and they're like, cut the green wire.
Yep.
And there's like 6 green wires and you're like, which one? Like
Yeah,
like,
electricity is one of those things.
Yeah, it's like you're gonna have 2 wires. They're gonna be black and red. And then you go out to the site and it's like, oh, it's actually yellow and brown.
Yeah,
it's
brown.
like, okay, well,
Yeah.
here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's typically how it goes, honestly.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Pierre, electricity in our industry is just so important, so vital, and it has to be exactly right. And we're dealing with a lot of it.
Yeah, an industrial scale level of it.
Mhm.
And so, when we think about high voltage, right? So we are in Rockdale. We're at the Sandow switch. So we have, I think it's 138 kV
Yes.
coming in,
Hmm.
and then that goes into our substation,
Yes.
and that goes to 13.8.
Yep. It's
Gets divided by
step
10.
down to 13.8, and then after that, it goes to our transformers, gets turned into 416 technically, and then that is fed to our switch gears, and then on to our miners as single phase into the building onto our miners.
And you mentioned the PDUs; those sit between the switch and the mining rig.
Yes, yes, sir. That sits between the switch gear and the mining rig.
So you started out helping Cameron wire together those PDUs for
Yep.
the immersion building, right?
Yeah, we were actually doing basically a quality control check just to make sure that these were coming in properly, and we had to actually help the manufacturer at some points get them done because our site, as you know, is very, very demanding. It's a very large site, and we're one of the biggest in immersion cooling. And so we had to actually help the manufacturer that was doing them complete them at some points. And we were also in charge of getting them up, wired together, testing them, making sure they had the right voltage, everything was working properly. It was a very big uh, job for me stepping into electrical for the first time ever.
Yeah, and the PDUs sit on top of the tank. They're kind of elevated. That make it an additional challenge as well.
Oh, very much so. Having to uh, build up the upper body strength to get them up there, standing on the tanks or standing on a ladder to try to wire them in together. It was a very big challenge, very sore after all of that.
So I think that if we advertised our job roles as like more of like a CrossFit gym where you come and get your exercise, like we could charge
Exactly.
people to work
We
at
literally
Riot.
could. We could.
So that's fascinating. And did you feel like it was pretty easy to pick up as you were kind of making that transition?
Yeah, so I'm typically one of those people that if it's hands on, I pick it up really quick.
Yeah.
And so this was very hands on. It was throw you into the water, you got to swim kind of thing. So I did pick it up a little quicker than I anticipated I would,
Yeah.
which was great for me and great for everybody else. But it was a bit of a challenge at first to kind of wrap my head around what these PDUs are doing, what the miner is doing and all that stuff.
It's one of my favorite things about Riot is the number of people who have been able to advance their career here and find opportunities for growth. So that's awesome to hear. Um, and the now, what kind of tools are you working with when you're working on the PDUs?
So typically you're just using crimpers, strippers, a Phillips head screwdriver. It's actually a lot more simple than what I thought it was going to be, but they work great. Um, the tools that we started with were kind of like community tools, um, and we had grown. Actually, it's really funny. Me and Blake, the other electrician I work with, we had grown to actually really enjoy using those tools. And then when they bought us new ones, to better ones really to use, we were just like, but we had perfectly fine tools. But the tools that we use are actually pretty simple just to get the job done. Um, it's a lot more simple than the average person would think.
The challenge is to know where to wire things up.
Right,
Right.
right. To know, because we have what we call neutral jumpers and neutral mains, to know which receptacle every neutral main needs to land on, make sure it's there. It was a bit of a challenge to get that wrapped around in my head personally.
Nick, I got a quick question for you. You said that you came from the background of framing and not knowing much about the electrical side of stuff, but sitting here today and listening to you talk, it sounds like you have a pretty good understanding of all the different stuff that goes into the electrical components that we're talking about. How long did it take for you to get comfortable learning all that stuff, and what was that process like?
It I would say it probably took me close to 8 to 9 months to really wrap my head around what's going on and why it's going on, because that's the most important part, is why this electricity is doing what it's doing. Um, but if honestly, if it weren't for my amazing supervisor Cameron, I would not be as knowledgeable as I am today, because he did work really hard to make sure that we understood exactly what we were doing and why we're doing it.
Cameron is very generous with his knowledge. I
Yes.
love asking him questions, and he'll start drawing a diagram right away
Yep.
and clear things up.
Oh yeah. He will make sure you understand it before you leave.
Yeah. So now the electricity goes to the mining rigs, but there's also other systems within the facility that the electricity is going into. On the immersion, there's the pumps and the dry coolers. How is that different than what goes into the on the mining rig side?
So it really doesn't get any different. What I will say is that our pumps use all three phases of our electrical that's coming into the building, rather than our miners use a single phase each. And our dry coolers are also three phase. They have fans on top of them, and that's to help keep everything cool, keep the lines in the water cool. But the power itself really doesn't differentiate. Besides the pumps, funny enough, the pumps and the dry coolers that cool the miners use a lot less electricity than the actual miners themselves do.
That's interesting. I think when people are shopping for a mining rig, sometimes they don't know like what the difference is between single phase and three phase. Do you want to explain that piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, so single phase will be so. Oh well, actually, I'll start here. Every place is fed either single phase or three phase, and for an industrial site like us, we are fed all three phases. The average place is only fed a single phase, but for us, the difference is we use our three phase to get as much electricity to the miners as possible, and because we also use pumps to cool a lot of different things. I mean, even our air cooled buildings have pumps on them. But really the only difference is just the application,
Right.
just the application.
That makes sense. And when you're kind of thinking about the maintenance and the construction of the system, Rockdale is, from a construction perspective, somewhat complete. I know that there's projects still going
Right.
on. And I don't know if you've had a chance to visit the Corsicana site yet, but that is, very much a construction project in works. Um, with your framing background, like when you look at the sprung structures, like what do you make of that structure that we have in Rockdale?
I think they're great buildings for what we are using them for. They're definitely probably the better option for us, because of how quick we want things to go, so that we can start making as much money as possible.
Yeah.
Uh, those buildings do fairly well for our miners right now. I think there probably in the future will be better options, but those buildings are definitely different. I've never really seen a tent style building that rigid and that big before. I've only ever seen them in smaller scales, so those buildings to me are amazing.
Yeah, there's always like an opportunity for something innovative to happen in this industry, like at every level, from the mining rig to the actual building. And yeah, in the context of when those were built, it was like around COVID. It was like
Yeah.
harder to get the right metals to build a metal structure. So yeah, it's a fascinating differentiator.
Sometimes when I'm in there, I forget that it is a tent structure. Like it just seems like such a solid building that you kind of forget that this is like a canvas style building. But yeah, it's funny to me because those buildings during the winter stay a really comfortable temperature, and then during the summer, obviously with the ambient heat, it gets warm in there. But it's never. It's just interesting because it's an insulated tent structure and it's solid. You don't get any drafts or anything like that, and the ventilation is pretty decent for what it is.
Right.
You'd mentioned the dangers of electricity. How does your team approach kind of the safety aspect of the role?
So the way we view our safety out there, if we can't do it without getting hurt, it won't get done for that moment. Now with everybody else, like anybody that's not in our department, we are very, very, very cautious because anything out there can happen at any moment. This what we're doing with our electrical equipment really hasn't been done very much, so there's not really a rapport for it. So we like to try to take the extra step of cautiousness just to be on the safe side. Like we'll have everybody move away from the miners when we go to turn a system on or off. We always try to take just a little extra step just to be sure that we're doing this as safe as possible. That so much so that it doesn't, hinder our work and the production that we have going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I imagine you also have, tools to identify kind of where the electricity is.
Right. So we do have what we call non-contact testers. We have some that are for low levels of electricity, and we also have some that are for very high levels of electricity. I mean, the average one you'll see just about almost anybody walking around with, any electrician or even minor maintenance. Actually, I think I have it. Is this guy?
Yeah,
This
there you
guy
go.
right here can save your life. You turn it on, and it'll beep whenever you touch anything that's hot. And it also has ranges from 12 to 1,000, and then from 70 to 1,000. And this thing has saved me many, many of times out there. Because, like y'all said, you look at a wire, you don't know that that's hot. I mean, you can obviously in the emergent buildings, you can look down at the miners and see, oh yeah, they're on.
Right.
But sometimes, you don't look at the miners. You're going up to fix a problem, and the first thing in your head is oh, I should test this.
Yeah.
And we have a little saying that we like to say in our department: you trust nothing, test everything.
I love that. I mean, that's so aligned with the Bitcoin ethos. Don't trust, verify
Right.
is kind of the famous meme tagline, I guess we'll call it. Um, and it really because I won't say the assumptions line, what assumptions do, but um, it's pervasive throughout society, right? The people have kind of sometimes gotten lulled into a false sense of safety that, hey, somebody
Right.
else is looking out for my safety, so I don't need to.
Hmm.
And that doesn't really match with reality.
No, no, not at all. Especially, being out there, and even data center people will tell you, they always try to find somebody to test something. Even if they look at the miner and the miner says it's off, they'll still come find one of us to come and make sure that this is off so that they know that they're working safely. And see, I like that's the thing that I think I like the most about being out there. The safety culture
Yeah.
out there is just amazing. Is everybody tries to do their best with making sure every job that's being done out there is being done as safe as possible, and that's awesome. And a lot of places I've worked, that's never been a really big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think from Riot's culture perspective, like we do emphasize the importance of people, right? At the end of the day, yes, we have 100,000 mining rigs, but the only way that they are turned on is if we have great people who are doing things safely, you know, and competently, and with a sense of urgency, but first and foremost, safely.
Right. I think the thing that I've been saying here lately is it always takes a village.
Yeah.
It takes a village to do everything we're doing out there, and it's every department. Every department puts in all of their strength to get everything done that we do out there. And it, a lot of people give us electricians praise, but without y'all, this wouldn't be getting done. All we do is turn it on.
Yeah.
Everybody else puts the miners in, hooks them up, makes sure they're in the right pools, make sure they're operating properly. All we do is just turn them on.
I think you got a lot of responsibility beyond just turning them on. But I wanted to go back to you mentioned that it takes a village. How many people are on y'all's department or on y'all's crew, and are y'all 24/7? Like I kind of know the answer to that, but I wanted you to explain it.
So if I'm not mistaken, I think we have either 13 or 14 people on our department. And we did just transition over to being 24/7. So we do have night shift now out there, just keeping an eye on everything, making sure there's nothing that's going to hurt anybody, just doing basically a safety walkthrough, repairs, stuff like that.
And part of that is also the procedures that y'all have in place as far as like lockout, tag out kind of stuff. So when y'all are servicing something, the only people who are allowed to work on that electrical piece of equipment is the electricians, correct?
Yes, correct.
Cool.
We do have a lockout, tag out procedure when we switch off the breakers and the 4,000 amp gears. We'll lock them out, and a lot of times we'll put what we call a hasp, which has 6 holes. So 6 different people can put a lock on it so that everybody has to have their lock off for that to get turned back on.
Got you. Yeah.
It's in Bitcoin we call that multi-sig. So you've got to have multiple signers.
It's funny how a lot of like the Bitcoin protocol relates to how, a fully functioning corporate, but like industrial scale, plant like this works. There's a lot of parallels to that.
Yeah, and people will criticize Bitcoin of, oh, it's so hard to use. And it's like, yeah, but you're using the monetary system at an industrial level. It's like
Right.
it's not your home plug, right, that you're plugging in, but it comes with its risks as well. Like in Bitcoin, it's like, hey, if you send your Bitcoin to someone, you can't just get it back, right? So in electricity, if you shock yourself, like you can't just undo that.
Yeah,
very
you
easily.
cannot just undo that.
Yeah. It requires a lot of, big picture thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the consequences are dire.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned breakers. What is a breaker?
So a breaker is what allows the electricity to pass from the initial 4,000 amp breaker to the miner rig. So that is our quickest means of shutting off all the miners, and probably one of the safer means of shutting off all the miners. Those breakers also protect the miners. If there is a hard ground fault, they should trip, or if the system is getting, like the gear itself is getting too hot, they will also trip, and that is just to protect themselves and the miners.
That makes sense. So it's when somebody has to go in their garage and flip that switch because they overloaded it or something.
Right.
Same concept.
It's like when your wife is using the hairdryer and you're trying to microwave breakfast at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have that issue with my microwave and my air fryer. If I ever put those two on at the same time, it without fail trips the breaker, and I got to go take a trip to the garage. So now I know that I can't use both at the same time. Speaking of microwave and electricity and stuff like that, anytime that I'm talking to somebody who's not familiar with Bitcoin or mining, and for that matter, I always try to explain to them exactly how much electricity each miner uses. What is the equivalent to what one miner uses as far as microwaves go? How many microwaves are per miner?
Oh, that's a good one. If I had to guess without doing any math, I'd probably say around 3 to 4, maybe even 5 for some miners.
Yeah, depending on the model of miner, and
Yeah.
depending obviously on what wattage your microwave
Right.
is running at. But like, say 1,000 watt microwave, which is pretty easy to
It'd be about 4 of those put together.
Isn't that crazy? How we
Yeah,
have
that's wild.
what is the latest number? Like 112,000 miners deployed, and you multiply that by 4 microwaves. That's what 450,000 microwaves running at the
Yep.
same time. That's crazy.
That is a lot.
Yeah, a lot of electricity going through that facility.
Yeah, I remember one of our critics was talking about the last summer. When we were selling electricity, they were like, "Oh, I should have a facility with 500,000 microwaves. Just run those, and then I'll turn them off to benefit from demand response curtailment." And it's like what they're missing there is that the microwave, yes, it'll reheat your hot pocket, but that's
It's not saving the monetary financial system of the entire world.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, there's not
And
utility for running 500,000 microwaves.
no, not 24/7.
No, but Bitcoin mining, there's a significant reason for that.
Yeah.
That's cool. And then also the other argument of like, how many swimming pools of water does Bitcoin mining take? Well, how many swimming pools of water does swimming pools take?
Yeah, and also, were you going to swim in Alcoa Lake? Was
No.
that the
Yeah,
plan?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Would not recommend it.
Cool.
Maybe some catch and release fishing out there.
Release
I
heavy
wish
heavy
they
on the
would
release.
I wish they would let people do that.
Yeah. Maybe we'll make it happen one day. Well, I'm curious. What are your hobbies outside of work?
So I do quite a bit of golfing. I do like to spend time with family for the most part, but golfing and playing games, really, man.
Yeah.
That's it.
We have a new tradition at Riot of going golfing on the first Thursday of
Yep.
every month.
Yeah, we were actually on the same team one
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
How
It's
did
a
y'all
lot of fun.
do? Did y'all win that scramble?
I don't think we did.
I don't know.
You,
I
you
think
have
we
to have
were-
Tom on your team to win.
That's
Yep.
fun. Yeah,
You
I
sure
enjoy
do.
that too.
And my first time playing was with Tom and Thomas Betchen.
They did they knock it out of the park?
I think we came in second that time.
Yeah.
I think we did come in second. But Tom he's a pretty good golfer.
Yes.
I will give him that. I think he did like golfing in high school or college or something. He's a pretty good golfer.
We mentioned family. Nick, I know you have some family who are in the industry. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, sure. I do have my wife. She does work out at our site, Riot. She is a minor maintenance personnel. My little brother, he just got hired on here recently. He works for data center, and then my wife's father and brother also work in the same industry. And I think it's crazy to think about, but basically that whole side of my family is in this industry. And I actually found out about this industry from my father-in-law and brother-in-law, and ended up working for another site, another industrial site, just kind of like ours. And then I found out, about Riot, and I actually quit my job. And I want to say it took me about a week or two to figure out, because y'all didn't have any postings at the time. And it took me about a week or two to figure out how to get hired on at Riot. And I had met Heath somewhere. I don't know where I can't remember where I met him, but I met Heath somewhere, and he had told me, yeah, go to Workforce and they'll get you started. And so I did that, and here I am today, 2 years and 2 months later.
That's awesome.
Wait, when is your
Congratulations.
hire date, Nick?
My hire date was November 23rd,
Of 21?
21, I believe.
Mine is November 1st of 21.
Wow.
So that's funny. Wow. I didn't realize we were that close together and getting hired on at Riot.
Yeah, Cameron got hired on the month previous to that,
Wow.
on like the 21st of that month.
Yeah, I always mention to people when I first got hired at the end of 21, it was like 5 people in the office, maybe 6 or 7, right?
Yep.
And now we went from that first 3-plex office to a 12-plex.
Yep.
Literally quadrupled the size of our office, and it's full now. So it's incredible to see the pace of growth at Riot within, whether it be, accountants and administration and anything else, to electricians, to custodial, to security. Everything has grown exponentially over the years, the 2 years that I've been there.
The pace at our company is unbelievable, because coming from my background, the pace that we had in my background was fast, but I've never seen such a big scale grown so fast as Riot has. Because when I started, building F had just been completed, like the
Correct.
building itself.
Yeah, just the building.
And they were starting to do all the tanks and putting all the switch gears up, and then I got to watch G completely
in
be
D
built,
and E.
and D and E.
Yeah.
And it is just unbelievable, the pace that we operate at out there in our site,
Yeah.
and how well it operates for that pace.
Yeah, for the complexity and the amount of work that has to go into there, and to be able to do all of it, it's pretty nuts in the time frame. It takes a village of people who are engineers, of people who are draft and design, electricians who actually can follow those designs and implement them. It's pretty crazy.
And then I get into conversations with people where they say, Bitcoin mining does not employ anyone. It's just like computers doing their thing. And I'm like, it employs whole families.
Yeah,
Literally. Yeah, literally.
It's an absurd assertion. And we're hiring lots more people in Corsicana as well as we speak. So,
And I think the highlight for that is that it's all rural communities at this point, right? Like, we're not putting a mining facility in the heart of Austin. Yeah, we're close to Austin, an hour and some change away, but at the end of the day, we're in the community of Rockdale, Milam County. And so you're hiring people in those local small communities and whole families at that,
yeah, and I'll say like, oh, we're hiring 100 people, for example, and they're like, oh, that's not a lot. Texas has this many million. It's like, yeah, but Rockdale For Rockdale,
Yeah.
that's like a sizable percentage. Like we're the biggest employer now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Nick, what is it like having, so much family at the site? You get to run into them pretty often?
Actually, believe it or not, our site's so big, I really don't run into them that often. The only time I run into them is like on lunch and sometimes on a break here and there. But for me, I'm fairly all over the place when it comes to being at work and,
Yeah, electricians are needed in every area.
yeah. And I'm one of the electricians that carries a radio because we don't have very many electricians that carry a radio. So I'm being called to building to building to building to check on this, look at this, something smells funny over here, stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the facility and a lot of the teams rely on just calling, checking in with the electricians, make sure this is right, make sure everything is running well, just to be on the safe side of stuff. And that's why we don't have any major issues or a lot of major issues as far as stuff blowing up or people getting electrocuted. It's because the electricians are there to take care of that stuff.
Right.
Cool.
I'm very grateful, in fact, that you and your team were available to help me on my project of voltage ride-through testing. So I know in a previous episode we talked about voltage ride-through, and what we're doing out in Rockdale is setting up kind of a test area, a laboratory to experiment on what can the mining rigs ride through from the point of view of voltage disturbances. And we see voltage disturbances happen on the grid due to the amount of transmission that's going on. There's just so much longer and longer distances of transmission. Creates lower power quality, more opportunities for voltage disturbances. On top of that, when we look at the development of renewables, inverter-based resources like solar and wind, also vulnerable to these voltage disturbances. And so what we're currently testing for is, how do the mining rigs fare in this? And to set this test up, I could not have done it on my own because we've got 480 volt coming in. The testing machine is 240 volt. So already I needed a transformer to step it down. I don't have one of those.
Yeah, right.
But your team did, and y'all got that set up so quickly. And on top of that, wired it to the test tank to just make it so simple, for someone like me to use it. So hugely grateful for the work there, and it's just something I would not have been able to do.
Yeah, we try to make everything as simple as possible and as neat as possible, and that actual test was quite surprising to me. That we're actually looking at trying to do something about that now that it has become a bit of an issue with our miners, some of them, and I think we'll be able to get some really, really good evidence as to, can these miners handle this long of a pause from electricity? Can they handle just a little bit? What are they going to do? And I think the ideas that you've come up with for that is amazing. Now, when it comes to the blips in electricity, that part for me, I would have honestly never thought that would have affected a miner like that, and which was really surprising for me that just 2 seconds of a disturbance can cause so many different things to happen out there. And I don't think a lot of people realize that when it comes to like our industry and what we do out, when we're mining and stuff like that.
Yeah, and when I started learning about electricity, something I found surprising was, on one hand, it's very mathematical, it's very logical. On the other hand, there's a lot of plus or minus 10%. It's rated for this, but you actually use it at that.
Yep.
There's kind of some fuzzy things that you've got to negotiate with.
Yeah, it's definitely, I won't say it's a guess game, but sometimes you just have to try it out and figure it out to see if it's going to work. Because even though it says it's good on paper, it still might not.
Don't trust, verify.
That's right.
You got to run the numbers.
Test everything.
Yeah.
So are different models of miners affected of voltage ride through, do they have a big difference?
We will let the data guide us, but we
Ah,
don't yet have the data yet. So
gotcha.
we're trying to answer that exact question.
That's the whole reason behind this. Gotcha.
Yes, yes.
Cool.
After we're done recording this podcast, I'll be driving back out to Rockdale in
Mhm.
the field, doing more data gathering on that.
And what's that like for you, Pierre? I know that a lot of your time is spent in meetings and stuff like that, higher level stuff, and you don't get to spend too much time in the field. But how's that experience been for you working with the electrical department?
Oh, fantastic! I mean, I think that when 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 I came to Cameron with like what I had in mind, it immediately clicked for him, and he was like, "All right, here's what he got into problem solving mode,
Yep.
um, and I like problem solving mode for people I'm working with. What I don't like is problem finding mode of hey, this isn't gonna work, but then not really trying to find a solution. They're just at in Rockdale, it's the opposite. It's we're gonna find a solution. We're gonna make this work, and even finding a transformer. Like, hey, we happen to have one on inventory because of course we have one. So, um, and also the sense of urgency. Like, it just got knocked out really quickly. So I've enjoyed that a lot, and I think the only challenge is the distance, right? That I live in Austin. It is an hour and a half away, but yeah, it got me thinking, huh? Maybe I need to get a place out here.
Hey, there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
Have a little getaway in the country.
exactly.
There you go.
Get some horses, get some cattle. That's the other thing is I do like the rural context in which we operate. Um, so I think though that what motivates me on this issue is that my concern is that people are going to use voltage ride through to attack our industry in a way that is not guided by data and electrical engineering, but is rather guided by their political agenda of not liking Bitcoin.
Mm.
So now that they don't like Bitcoin, oh well, now voltage ride through is like, oh, we're damaging the grid somehow, even though we're no different than a solar panel or a wind generator as an inverter based resource, facing the same kind of grid challenges. So I think that getting the data and seeing, putting the criticisms in a real context rather than kind of in a narrative is critical. And the other part to it is hey, let's find solutions, right? So if voltage ride through is a real problem, let's get to the root cause and find ways to solve the problem from an engineering perspective. That way we can continue to provide really what I see as a very important service to the grid. It would be a shame if that people were like, oh, voltage ride through, we can't have Bitcoin miners on the grid. It's like, okay, look, anything you connect to the grid is going to have positive aspects of it and negative aspects. No pun intended. But and so we just have to have the right electrical engineering to make it reliable and safe and economical.
Hmm. Cool. I want to bring up real quick, and we don't have to include this. We don't need to, but we have some inclement weather forecasted for this next coming week. Does the electrical department have anything that they're doing specifically to kind of prepare for that?
Yes. So we have kind of devised a plan because we may have to shut some of our stuff down so that we can give some power back to the grid to help everybody out with cranking up the heaters during this time. So we do have a plan devised for that to try to mitigate how long it would take us to get that done, because typically when we do curtailments like that, it can take a little bit of time for everybody to get where they need to be and get everything shut off, make sure everything is shut off. But I think we do have a pretty solid plan for that.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges we've seen in past cold events is the dry coolers freezing and kind of bursting some pipes. So to mitigate that this time around, they've put glycol in the system. Glycol is like antifreeze, so
Right.
it'll prevent that outcome from happening. Um, And if it doesn't, then we'll cut this out of the episode.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And in addition, we kind of, to your point about curtailment of, hey, let's reduce our electricity consumption. We want to do that, and we also want to kind of keep the system warm. And
Right.
so it's not like we're curtailing 100%, because that would not be safe, right? So we just got to make sure that we're keeping things warm.
A significant majority curtailed, but enough to keep the systems warm enough to keep everything from freezing over.
It'll definitely be mainly our air-cooled buildings. We definitely don't want to shut down our immersion buildings for that very reason of, we want to keep the water going, the water at least somewhat warm.
It's circulating at the least.
Yeah, even though it does have glycol in it. I don't know. I know both of you know our site gets very windy, especially during this time of year. So that's a big factor that we're trying to put in play when it comes to that as well.
Yeah, risk management, weatherization. And I think that, when we look at what happened with Winter Storm Uri a few years ago, a lot of the problems that caused that outcome of blackouts have been addressed. Of, at natural gas pipelines being weatherized, being added to critical infrastructure lists so that they don't get turned off at the worst time.
Limbs being trimmed away from
trees.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Like that was a big one. It's just iced over limbs falling onto power lines and cutting off entire neighborhoods.
Yeah. So I think that everyone learned, from that extreme weather, and so going into Sunday evening, Monday next week, or when this episode gets released, we'll be looking back and with a sigh of relief that everything went well. Yes, always new learning opportunities as we operate at an industrial scale.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks, Nick, for coming on today. This was a fascinating conversation. I hope our audience also found it very interesting on the electrical side. I think we're going to have to do more electrical episodes, cover what voltages, what amps are current,
sure. Do an electricity 101.
Electricity 101. Yes.
I could use that.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. We'll be back next week with another guest, or just me solo, because maybe we're going to talk about the ETFs that have been released. I know that's been a big news item. And thanks, Gabe, for producing the show and chiming in as well.
Oh, yeah. Always happy to do it.
All right. We'll see y'all next week. And don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends.